Moonshine Jesus, baby, alright. Moonshine Jesus, a surprising delight. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show. Thank you so much for joining us. We are brought to you by progressivechristianity.org. We hope you will check out the wonderful resources available at progressivechristianity.org. Follow them on social media and follow us on social media as well. I'm here with my good buddy, Mark. How you doing today, Mark?
Doing great, Caleb. Doing great.
And are you ready to talk about Avatar, The Way of Water? Because that's what
I am so ready. I can't wait to hear your perspectives on a bunch of this. So I'm very excited. This is going to be good.
It's a very rich show. It's going to be a lot of fun. But since we're going to be talking about it, and since it's pretty new, something you need to know is that this is a zone that is filled with spoilers. You're going to find out a lot about Avatar, The Way of Water, but that's okay. It'll just whet your appetite.
Wet. Did you throw that? Yeah, well played. Whet your appetite. I like it.
Speaking of things that are wet, how about what you're drinking today, Mark? What are you drinking?
Well, since this particular Avatar went the way of the water, I went with a oceans themed drink. So I'm having a deep blue sea martini, which is vodka, blue curacao, and then some white cranberry juice. So, and it has this lovely kind of ocean tone to it. So for those who are watching live, you can see the nice blue ocean theme there.
It's flashing kind of back and forth.
Yeah, it's got that kind of movement. I love it. How about you, man? What did you decide to go with for the show?
So, Mark, it is cold and flu season.
Indeed.
Even in San Diego, it is cold and flu season. And so right before this show, I started off with a shot of DayQuil. Because my older one has brought home a cold. So since I am doing DayQuil, I am not drinking alcohol today.
This is a smart move.
The way of water. And so I took that very literally. I've got LaCroix, lime LaCroix water with blue food coloring. It just looks like water, and
I like it.
It looks like Avatar.
It looks like we color coordinated our drinks.
Yeah, doesn't that look great?
So, there. Cheers, sir.
Cheers, Mark. See you after drop.
Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. You are joining us for our Geek Out section, where Caleb and I hints to reveal the actual geeks that we truly are. And today, as he's already filled you in on, we're looking at Avatar, The Way of the Water, the follow-up to the blockbuster, the top ever selling blockbuster film, Avatar. And just for for those who may not, I don't know how anyone hasn't seen Avatar and have some idea where we're going on this film, but I'll go ahead and give you a quick recap of this film. So ultimately, this is my recap. On the lush moon called Pandora, our heroes from the first movie, whose event happened sometime like 14 years earlier, Jake Sully and his Pandoran wife, Natiri, have formed a family, and they are all very a tightly bonded together kind of family. But unfortunately, a former threat resurfaces, that threat namely being humans, and they target Jake and Natiri and their family, and they have to leave their home and live with a Pandoran clan that has like deep connections to the sea. And in the end, Jake, his family, and even the clan have to end up fighting the humans in order to save their life, save their culture, and ultimately, save their world. And that's where we are going to start geeking out from, is talking about our experience of this movie. So Caleb, I'm very curious, like what were your expectations going in, and then like as you left, how did you feel like they were met or not met? Where did it leave you as well?
Yeah, so I'm really glad that we watched the first Avatar a couple of months
Recently,
ago for this
yeah.
show, because it had been years. I think neither one of us had seen it since it came out. And so I was glad, because I wouldn't have had much of an
Yeah,
idea of what was
because
going
that was
on.
like 12 years ago that it came
It was
out.
a long time
Yeah.
ago. And it was a blockbuster in large part because of the way that it advanced technology. I think the story was very interesting as well, but there was this whole
Absolutely.
thing around 3D and motion capture and all of this fun stuff.
Right.
So I was curious to see, if it would be that big of a deal this go round, because
Yeah.
a lot has changed since 2009 in terms
You don't
of
say.
how we experience movies and what our expectations are of graphics and all of that. And I went in wondering if I would be impressed at all by it or
Yeah,
not. And,
sure, absolutely.
and I actually I left feeling like I liked this movie as a movie better than I liked the first one. I felt like the story was more engaging. It kept me interested more,
Right.
and I felt myself still very impressed with all of the graphics and the way that James Cameron was able to bring this to life. And I know
Yeah.
that he had to wait for the motion capture technology to catch
catch
up with what he
Yeah.
wanted to do, because he wanted to go and do all these underwater scenes and stuff. So I was pretty impressed. How about you, Mark?
I kind of I have mixed emotions about the film. I will share the good ones, and then a little bit later we'll talk about some of my mixed emotions about it. I was the same issue. I was very curious to see, since the first one was such a hit in part because of the technology and seeing something on screen we'd really never seen before. I was very curious about that. Since I watched the first one in 3D and was not altogether thrilled with the 3D, I decided I did want to see this one in 3D as well, just to have a one-to-one comparison. I have to say, this is the best 3D I've ever seen in my life. This is the first time I was watching a 3D movie, because I still do from time to time. This is the first time I've ever watched a 3D movie where the 3D didn't get in the way, didn't pull me out of the movie, because I could tell it wasn't done particularly well, or they used it too much, and it was distracting. This was incredibly well done. You immediately felt the depth, and it didn't feel contrived. It didn't feel forced. I really love that about it. The visuals were out of this world. Every frame was a piece of art. And the water scenes in particular, as we would expect, were just, they're hard to describe how beautiful they were and how real and authentic it felt, because they created the largest ever tank of water for a studio for filming this in, and all of the actors and actresses learned to do free diving kind of breath holding techniques, where they were some of them are up to almost 7 minutes worth of holding their breath, and so they could do these scenes, do motion capture, and then put it back into the avatars. Yeah, that part was brilliant. I was along with you. The story definitely held my attention a lot better than in the first one did. And I left kind of feeling like they were somewhat equally, in my mind, balanced. I like both of them for different reasons. But this one, I thought really I enjoyed that we stayed with the family, and kind of that became a theme of it. Did you like that it was all centered around the one family and their relationship and how that played out?
I did, and that was one of the key things that I think was a significant kind of change between this one and the first one. I think the first one leaned really heavy on kind of the environmental justice themes, the Mother Nature, the connectedness of all life, and I think the theme of this one was definitely about family. The other stuff was there, and but not to the extent that it was in the first one. I thought that was a good narrative move. And I think this also speaks to one of the great things about James Cameron. I think James Cameron is one of the few directors who can make the sequels better than the original. I mean, Terminator 2 or Aliens. He's got kind of a track record of doing that. And to me, it felt like this was a good way to build on the original story. And I think certainly in terms of the things we were just talking about, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see an Oscar for cinematography in this and for special effects. But I did, I was engaged by the story. I was invested, but man, 3 hours. That's like a long time.
Yeah, it really is. And I'll be honest, like in some ways, the first movie was pretty long as well. And in some ways, the length of it didn't bother me. Yeah. This one, it did feel like there were moments that the pacing was a little too slow.
Yeah.
And there were parts of what happened where he was just showing off, whereas the story of the family getting acclimated to being in the water and the ocean, and there wasn't any real story that advanced during the period where we saw them learning all this stuff. And it was really, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not too bothered by it because he should have been showing off. There was a lot of him just showing off. Look what we can do now. Look what we can show you. Look how beautiful and magnificent these water scenes are and how realistically they are interacting, even though a lot of it's CGI on top of motion capture. I think that could have been shortened a bit. I don't think it needed to be quite this long. I know. Did you think being that long paid off? Or
the point that I would have said, hey, it feels like we could have done a montage, or we could have skipped forward here a little bit. And although there were pieces, so like in terms of narrative, I felt like a lot of it could have been cut or done a little bit differently. For the theologian in me, kind of liked the bonding and the exploration of building relationships and stuff, but also that's like not necessarily what makes for a great blockbuster movie.
Right. And they did put enough. I mean, ultimately, there's a lot of conflict in the movie. I mean, and it was necessary conflict, and it does keep that tension in different places so you don't fall down on the emotions of the movie and all. But here's the thing. So you've got this movie that does all these wonderful things like environmental issues, addressing corporate greed, colonialism and its impact on Native culture and Native rights. And a lot of story here about family, about adopted family, about chosen family. So there's all these fantastic pieces that they're really doing. And I love that. But here's where I told you I have a complicated relationship with this
another
movie.
shoe can drop. Here it is.
Yeah. Here's where my complicated there is a lot of machismo posturing going on in this movie that I really did not like. There was a whole lot of violence solves problems that I did not like. There was a whole lot of the machismo goes to a really horrible place in this line that I'm sure is going to always be a famous line from the movie where Jake says, "A father protects." It gives him meaning. And that seemed to be a big theme, even to the point that his kids end up confronting other kids who are picking on the sisters and said, "I need you to respect my sister." Like that's the male. Like I know as a father, while part of my job was to protect, that was part of my kid's mom's job too. That was a piece of being parent, not male, not the father. And everything about this movie was so misogynistic in terms of that that's your main job and that's what gives you actual meaning.
Yeah,
is to protect. That's like your key thing. Whereas I know as a father, the thing that gave me the most meaning in terms of raising my kids, and it wasn't because I was a father, but part of being a parent, was teaching them.
Yeah,
was teaching them even things like these male-female roles that we get pushed into by society are a bunch of crap, and you're going to be healthier if you don't see it that way. Those were the things that gave me meaning. Were those parts? How did you handle? They were so clear. You had to have been reacting to them in some way.
Yeah. So I agree that it was problematic, and I mean, from the point where we see Jake Sully making the decision for his family to move, even though his partner doesn't want to,
Right.
And so he makes the decision for the family, what's best for the family, and then we do see these acts of violence and as if. They have an obligation to defend the female, and
Mhm.
I think we also get a pretty clear setup whenever we're talking about like the sea beasts, the Tolkien sea
Yeah,
beasts,
those giant ones. Yeah.
right? That are pacifistic, and we get a pretty clear notion that that leads to their extinction, and
Yep.
that there needs to be acts of violence whenever you're threatened. And I mean, they set that up pretty clearly for us to see that actually what that species is doing is going to lead to extinction, and
Right.
so you have to retaliate in violence. And I'm not sure that we explored the use of violence in any meaningful way. I think that we were force fed the explanation of what that was like, and I left feeling like that was pretty problematic in the same way.
That's
I left
exactly. I mean,
feeling kind of icky about
yeah. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized it detracted from the movie for me. Like, I really think that this is a major issue with the movie. Like, there's so many wonderful things, and they are trying so hard to set themselves. I mean, there's even like, this is so crazy. I mean, there's scenes where in the tribe, and I'm not even going to try to say their remember what their name is. The tribe that's the water tribe. Where the mother is the head of the whole tribe. So like, yay, okay, you're doing right things here. There's a scene where they're about to go to war, and her husband, who is clearly the general of her army, kind of pats her pregnant belly and says, "Do you think you should really go?" And she was like, "I ride." You know, so I was like, "Yeah, okay." You know, because we don't see any, or I was going to say enough, but maybe any of that where the reality of a pregnant woman is pregnant women all the time are walking right up to the time of giving birth, doing all kinds of very physical and amazing things. So there's this wonderful thing where they're trying to show what we should be like, but they fall into this trap over and over again of the misogynistic machismo storyline that just, like I said, the more I sat with it, the more I became disappointed of the movie on that particular point. It's still beautiful. It is still dealing with, like I said, environmental issues, corporate greed, the colonialism, the way it impacts Native peoples. All of that, they do wonderful things there that too few movies are doing. I just wish they didn't need to have this violence machismo theme be so like ringing throughout the movie.
I think you're right. And it really kind of contradicts what the first one did, because I feel like the
Right.
first one did a better job of showing the problems with kind of the machismo and always resorting to violence
Absolutely.
as you know, the native Pandorans only used violence as a last resort, whereas the Earthlings were coming on and they were very aggressive. And I think you're right that we kind of backtracked on that quite a bit.
Well, listen, I know we always say this, and maybe particularly on this movie because it's so full of so much story. We could continue to geek out, but we're out of time now. We need to move on to our next segment where we kind of delve into the politics and theology, our Politico segment of the show, which we'll be right back for after this drop.
everyone, and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show, where today we're talking about Avatar, the Way of Water, and we're moving into our Theopolitico segment. And so this is a show that is filled with lots of theology and politics. We could go a lot of different places, but tell you what, it's the week of Christmas.
Yes.
So I want to talk about one particular element that stood out for me, and I want to get your perspective on this. We get the oldest child, the oldest daughter that they've adopted, kind of an adopted child, who we find out is from Sigourney Weaver's character in the first show, and they don't know how she's gotten pregnant or how this daughter has been born, and so we get a divine conception of the oldest daughter, and then we begin to find out that she has some kind of sacred connection with Awa, with the great spirit of Pandora. Tell me, Mark, what do you make of that? And do you see any parallels with the birth narratives that we find in the Gospels?
Well, I mean, there's certainly the potential for parallels there in terms of a child with no biological father, possibly. We don't know that that's the case. There's, at the beginning, a lot early on, they're picking on Kiri, this child. They pick on her that Norm is her father. And they could potentially be Norm. That could be her father. And by the way, I'm stuttering a little bit here because you just ripped the carpet out from under me for my make me look stupid question, because this is what I was going to ask you.
I love it.
So now I'm also scrambling, going, what's my next question going to be? Because I didn't prepare a backup. I usually have backups. I didn't have a backup. So there is the potential for that, and it plays out even more. And I think it is likely that we're going to find that Iwa, the mother goddess of the planet, who is the spirit of the planet. I think as Sigourney Weaver's character was dying, and they were trying to get her spirit pushed over into the avatar that was her body, that ultimately didn't work, that somehow Iwa left part of Iwa's spirit and soul in that body as they were trying desperately, but had to cut it off. Because we do see Kiri being very in connection with Iwa and the spirit of this planet, and we see the planet responding to her. So I think, there's some most likely some very strong, intentionally placed overtones of the child born without a biological father. And I think my guess will be in the next movie, because we're going to get 3 more movies, by the way. He's decided for 4 sequels, and so we get 3 more. I suspect the next one's going to be a lot around Kiri and her connection to Iwa and her special birth narrative, which, like you said, this time of year, interesting. He also decided to put this out at Christmas, so we've got this. I think he knows what he's doing. I mean, her mother's Kiri, Sigourney Weaver's mother's name, or the name of her character, is Grace Augustine. So don't tell me that Cameron wasn't thinking about some Christian overtones in the story he's writing, when the mother of Kiri, her human name is Grace Augustine. I mean, come on, right? I mean, what did you think about it?
So I had a similar interpretation, because this is obviously the way that people talk about someone having some kind of a special connection with the sacred, or some kind of a special connection with how with other people, or they're going to live a great life. They've talked about this for a long time. That was the ancient way of saying that someone was special, right? That someone had a divine conception. There's some kind of mystery around their birth. So I think he's very much kind of tapping into this ancient wisdom here, and my thought was the same, that somehow it is this great spirit that has done this. I mean, that basically is the birth narrative that we get at Christmas time, that somehow it is the great spirit that has done this. So it's kind of a mirroring of that. And I also kind of thought, as she's coming into her powers here, we get like a Jesus as a 12-year-old in the temple kind of moment, where she's special, but we don't know exactly how, and we don't know exactly what she's going to be capable of. And so we have a bit of foreshadowing of I think what's going to happen in the next.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think there's any chance that she isn't central to the next part of this story. I mean, we haven't really mentioned much of this in this story. What's happening is the humans have made Earth pretty much uninhabitable, and they're needing to find another place to go. And there's some wonderful kind of almost Garden of Eden looks to Pandora, that it really feels like it's this unbelievable space that there's no other place that could be as spiritual and fulfilling to be. So we see humans coming, which I think is fantastic. It is almost like a second Eden, and humans are ruining Eden again. So I think that's an interesting plot line there, right?
Yeah, and the scene where the humans come, I think, is a particularly powerful scene, because we see the Pandorans kind of enjoying life, and we get Jake narrating about happiness and how happiness can vanish in a heartbeat. And the heartbeat is the humans coming in on their ships, and all they do is land. And the fires from their their burners as they're landing catches this perfect place on fire, which leads me to my next thought and question, Mark, which is about colonialization and how these folks were colonizing, the Earthlings were colonizing Pandora. Do colonizers or people who are coming with some kind of ill intent, do they automatically have a negative impact on land just by their mere presence there, before they even do anything? Is just stepping foot somewhere else, does that necessarily bring negative consequences? Or can you help me think through colonization a little bit, and if there's ever any positives that come from that?
Well, I can't think historically of any time that there's positives from it, but just from a pure logistic point of view, I think that what we have to say is that there is no way that colonizers don't have an impact. The question is, can it be a positive impact? Can it be an impact that has very little negative influence? And I think the question comes to, why are we, quote, colonizing? Our history is full of colonizing to gain something, whatever it is. And so we don't come in with best intentions. We don't come in trying to understand cultures and try to relate to cultures and see how we can be mutually beneficial to each other. So my answer would be, we always we so far when we colonize, it's always bad. I don't know that it always has to be, but it comes down to why are we doing it, and what's our motivation? I don't know. I mean, what's your take?
Yeah, I thought the point that you brought forth about how the Earth is already being destroyed, I think is new. I don't remember us getting that much detail about.
I don't remember that being the case,
other than they were mining for some kind of a material.
Well, I'm not sure. Yeah, and it may be that, and that's just so sad since we saw the movie just a month or two ago. It may be that they were mining. It may be that they quickly mentioned that they're mining it because they need this material because it's the only thing that's going to save the Earth. I think there's some part of that storyline in there, but it wasn't heavily pronounced for sure.
Whatever it was, that was the MacGuffin that got them there.
Right. Exactly.
And, I thought them saying that was interesting this go round, and the point that whenever they arrived, it was clear that the goal was to do to Pandora the exact same thing that had happened on the Earth. And so, like, the point of colonialization there was to improve life for the Earthlings, no matter what it cost, and no matter what the casualties were. There there was no kind of remorse. There was no value of human life,
Right.
which
Yeah.
I mean certainly seemed to be reflective of how Europeans colonized. And
Absolutely.
so it's also, you're right. It's a reflection of who are we talking about? Who's it best for? And
Right.
it's always
Yeah.
always best for.
Absolutely. Well, and we also know what Cameron thinks about this. We know this very clearly, what Cameron thinks about what colonizers are, because we have, like you've pointed out, we have all these some images of Christmas. And like I said, there's this sort of a Garden of Eden kind of thing. The humans come in, and it is fire that destroys the indigenous peoples. The name of the truck company that they use is Hell Truck. The name of their establishment that they make there is Hell's Gate. I think Cameron was pretty straightforward of what he thought colonization of indigenous lands was brought to those folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So another interesting point to take us back to the theological for a moment that I thought was interesting was, again, in relation to the older daughter who is interestingly voiced by Sigourney Weaver as her daughter. So
there's a great story about Cameron asking her to do it too. He asked her that, like, says, "I want you to be in the movie." She's like, "Well, how are you going to do that? My character's dead." And he's like, "I want you to play a 14-year-old." And he gave a pause, and she kind of looked at him quizzically, and then he said, "We all know you're a 14-year-old at heart." And she said, immediately I knew he was right, so I said yes.
So in this new character, she connects with Awa in the kind of tree in the cove, in the sacred cove, and she seizes. And so Jake Sully's reaction is to call in the scientists to see if they can treat her, and
they can't find anything wrong with it.
Successful. Yeah. No, right. And scientists are not successful, and so the native healer comes in to work. And the scientists give this explanation saying it's epilepsy, and there's a lot of activity in the frontal lobe, and religious delusions are indicative of epilepsy, which makes me wonder, Mark, are all religious experiences the result of some kind of mental illness, or are there authentic religious experiences? What's your take on that?
Well, my take would be that they're both. There are very authentic ones, but some of the more miraculous ones that we hear about, there are actually some pretty straightforward scientific explanations about the chemicals in our brains that push and cause these kind of things. So I see where Cameron, what he was doing with that line of the story. But I mean, spiritual experiences have as much to do with relationships and community, with emotional responses where you have some kind of an insight into life, into what actually matters. So I would have to say, no, there are plenty of spiritual experiences that are honestly, even scientifically understandable from a psychological points of view. So I think it was kind of a cheap shot, frankly, but that's okay. It's a silly movie, so sometimes they're going to oversimplify things so we can get it, in quotations, get it. I don't know. What did you think about it?
Yeah, although I think we'll find out that she actually did have an experience, and that was because of her relationship with Awa, that she had that experience.
But I would argue, though, that her kind of going unconscious, yes, she had this experience where she was seeing and interacting with, and I would even argue there was probably some chemical involved with that exchange between the two of them, with the way they connect and the way that their brains kind of become one almost, and that she was chasing to find out who her father was, and the answer to who her father was is probably such a difficult answer that it's what caused her to seize, and it was too much. There was this emotional chemical response. So it's both and for me, at least the way I saw what was going on.
I think that's an important point, and to recognize that. A lot of times we want to attribute things that happen in religion to the supernatural. And I mean,
Right.
we are talking about something that is not understood completely. But I think you're right that most of the time, whenever we're talking about religious experiences, they are things that we can explain if we're open to the connection between science and what we're doing. Man, I've got like 1,000 more questions that I want to get your perspective on for our Theopolitico thing, but we'll be here all day, Mark. So
We probably would.
I think we better wrap it up, and we better go into our favorite segment, the Make Me Look Stupid segment, because I want to see, now that I've stolen your question, I want to see what question you're going to dream up to make me look stupid.
I just hope I find one that's even harder than my first one, because now that you've ruined it for me, I really want to stick it to you.
Okay, well, let's come back after drop and you can stick it to me.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. You're joining us for what is usually our favorite segment, but Caleb managed to steal away my question in the last segment, so now I am forced to scramble. But you know what? I am a professional. I am ready to go. I'm not even going to defer to you, so I have more time to think about a question, because you know why? You know why? I'm too afraid that you're going to steal my damn question again. So there's no way you're going first on this round. No, right. As a matter of fact, I'm going to ask a two-part question, just hoping that one of them may have been your question.
Oh,
so,
thank you.
Yeah. You brought this on yourself, man. You brought it on yourself. You had no one to blame but you. All right. So here's my two-part question. So the humans go to Pandora in the first movie to get unobtainium, and they don't ever get it. We don't hear anything about it in this movie. So the first part of the question is, why aren't they trying to get unobtainium anymore? And then the second part of the question is, since they are coming back and not for unobtainium, why are they colonizing Pandora, a place where they can't even breathe the air? That's my two-part question.
Yeah,
so you did this to yourself. You did this to yourself. I didn't have that. I had to think of that during. There you go. It's all you, man.
This was honestly probably my biggest problem with this movie. And as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, I do feel like it really was a MacGuffin. That it was just the catalyst to get them there. And it felt really weird that they didn't seem to care about the unobtainium anymore. And I didn't feel like there was a real reason that they needed to introduce this other plot device, that they needed to get the stuff from the brains of the toucan things that all of a sudden.
And that's something we didn't talk much about, because it extends life, which is another. Our pursuit of making life longer, does that matter or not? Like, is there more value in life if it's longer? Anyway, sorry.
And maybe one of the reasons we didn't even talk about it is because it didn't really play into the plot at all. It had
They didn't even bother to bring it up until halfway through the movie.
Maybe even further, and it didn't have anything to do with anything that they were doing.
True.
It was mainly about the Colonel's drive for vengeance, and it didn't. So it felt like it felt like there was no real reason other than plot device for them to even be serving it, to be going after anything. So, but I found that problematic.
Yeah.
Why they're trying to colonize Pandora without
because they can't breathe there.
It doesn't make much sense. It really doesn't make much sense. And so I had the same thought, and as I'm watching, they built this new city in a year, and they're bragging about how much they've done. As they're
Hell's Gate.
Hell's
Why
Gate.
they decided to call it that?
As they're all, so I'm sitting there watching them put on these masks. I'm like, this looks terrible. Is this the only inhabitable planet? Like there's some kind of life? We don't get an answer to that. And I feel like we kind of deserve a better answer as to why they're there and to why they've chosen this. And I think this makes James Cameron look stupid, Mark, because I don't think we get an answer, or at least not one that was satisfying.
I think you're right. I think the answer is bad writing. I think that's the answer. Is that it really is just bad. It's cheap. It's easy writing. And if there's any other complaint other than the kind of over machismo, misogynistic crap that runs throughout the whole dang movie, for me it is that the writing is somewhat clunky. It is a good story. It's not an innovative story, but it's good and interesting, and it keeps you engaged. But the dialogue itself is frequently not very good. It's a little short and stilted. It doesn't really feel authentic. But some of the key points of why all of this is happening feels like they're not supported at all. I suspect there'll be enough complaints about it that he will bring in a slightly better writing team, and they will try to correct it in the next movie to explain some of it away so that it makes a little more sense to sort of save the plot line of the movie. But right now, that I can't even, like, trying to give them like the grace. I can't figure out. Both of those questions seem weird, very weird.
Yeah. And so that leads me to my question, because it's
dang it, I didn't mean to help you.
So budget aside, because this was a super expensive movie, and it filmed like over 5, like they started filming this thing in 2017. It was a long process. So let's put aside the budget. It feels like, okay, we've got 2 movies in 6.5 hours or so worth of Avatar story that we've seen.
Right.
We've got 3 more movies planned, and we know that the third one has already been like a third of the way through filming or something like that. So that one's and unless they just decide to scrap it, it's getting made. Sure. So if you set the budget aside, Mark, would this really be better as some kind of a streaming series or something like that rather than movies? Or you think it works well as it is?
I would say that it's a great question, really interesting question. For me, the story definitely works better as a streaming serial. But the visuals deserve a big screen, man. Yeah. Like, I'm just going to be honest. The misogyny, the violence, you could remove the counterbalances of environmental issues, corporate greed, all the stuff we talked about. You could remove those counterbalances, which doesn't really make it okay, but it feels like, okay, at least it got a little bit of what helps society. You could even remove that. I still want to go to a movie theater and watch this movie with the sound off, so I don't have to see and hear all of the crap that's wrong and not okay about it. I still want to see. Man, I was sitting there with my 3D glasses on thinking, this is big. Like, what the visual stuff they did. I even once or twice removed them to see what was going on. Because there were moments where I was like, this is beautiful. This is perfect. Yeah. And he was so refined in the way that he used the 3D. There were moments where I would take my glasses off and there was no 3D on the screen. Like he wasn't just using it to use it. Yeah. He only put it in when it gave the benefit of making you feel like you were present in the depth of what was going on. And then the moments where that was just showing off, just strange because he showed off for a little bit there. He brought it all back into 2D and just made it visually stunning. So I think that was brilliantly done. And for that reason, it does feel like it belongs on the big screen, but the story isn't really a big screen story, and it's also a little too long for the big screen. I mean, that was my take. Where did you end up?
Yeah, and I watched it in 2D because I remember the last time I watched this in 3D, like 3 hours of it made me sick. And I was also in a theater where they had like the moving seats.
Oh,
And I'm like, I don't think I can do that for 3 hours.
yeah. No.
I think it's gonna make me sick. So I watched it just in 2D, and I sat there thinking, I feel like the story would be given more justice if this were a serial. If we could watch this as a series,
Visually in 2D, did it feel like the big screen benefited it or not?
Yeah, so it's one of those movies, just like the first one, where you watch it and you know you're watching something that's significant. And so I think that's right. I think that with a budget like this, in order to do that, you really can't do it as a serial. You can't spend $300 million on something that you're going to stream. I don't think you can recoup it. I mean, because the first one grossed over $2 billion. You got to put it in the theater. But if we were just talking in terms of story, I think that the story would get fleshed out much more if we were able to see 10-hour-long episodes a season or something like that.
Yeah.
But what are you going to do?
Completely agree. Hey, I'm going to take a personal moment now and give a shout out to one of our live viewers, Eric Cooper, who has read me on Patheos, and he's one of the pagans I assumed that I probably celebrated in one of my articles there. I'm not sure which one he's talking about. But Eric, glad you tuned in. I hope you've seen enough that you like it and decide to continue watching us and joining us here, because we have this kind of stupid, geeky fun every week, except for the next few weeks, right?
Yeah, that's right. We've got to take a little vacation ourselves, and I'm sure we'll be drinking and watching lots of fun movies, but we're not going to be talking about them on the Moonshine Jesus Show until 3 weeks from today.
3 weeks from today, and we haven't decided what show we're going to review yet, but follow us on Facebook, and you will find out. You can follow us individually because we will both let it be known, but also make sure you follow the Moonshine Jesus Show on Facebook, where we will announce at least a week ahead of time what our next review will be. Listen, we rebooted this podcast this year, and early this year, and we've made it through an entire season, almost 40 episodes this year, Caleb. I have to tell you, I have had a blast.
It's been amazing.
This show sat still without being recorded for a very long time because I did not think, as many times as I asked folks to tell me who they would like to see and what we should be doing, I never found the right partner to reboot this. And I have to say, boy, did I find the right partner. I've had the most fun with you, man. You geek out about it just as deeply as I do, and quickly pivot to politics and theology. You just don't find a lot of folks who want to do sci-fi, fantasy, superhero stuff and pivot it into politics and theology. I am so thrilled about what we have done this year. This is the last episode of our reboot, episode 1. And I can't wait to start season 2 with you, man.
Oh, me neither. It's going to be fun. This has helped me with my sanity this year, Mark. I mean,
Right?
Finding someone else to geek out about these shows with has been a lot of fun. So thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
And most importantly, thank all of you for listening and watching live. Like, you're the folks that make us want to do this. That folks are joining in with us on all of this kind of geekiness and appreciating the pivots that we do towards politics and theology and the input that you give us. This is my favorite part of the week. And as a minister, that says a lot. There's so many things in my life that I am grateful for every week. This is the point that on a personal outlook, I look forward to every week. And you, the listeners, are the folks that make it possible for us to do this. So thank you all so much. I wish you a very happy and joyful, inclusive holiday season. From me and Caleb, thank you. And we will see you in season 2 of the Moonshine Jesus Show.
Moonshine